Hi, I'm Barry McGough. I do corporate innovation and corporate applied innovation specifically. Today I'm going to talk to you about everyone's favorite subject, AI, and not that it's not overhyped, because of course a lot of people feel that it is, but I want to bring some reality to how we're applying AI with our workforce, especially in specific industries, and really bring it to life with some real examples of how people are using it practically in day-to-day life. So last year, we had a really good time in 2023. We started thinking about these funny memes and really having our minds blown with images that could be created with AI. So on the left, you see this meme that we all were thrilled by, which was the Pope in a puffy Balenciaga jacket. We thought it was amazing, really, really funny. And we thought, wow, this is the end of truth as we know it. We can make up anything we want. And this blew us away. 2 years later, this is what the Pope can do. Amazing, right? So if we're going to put this into context, let's ground AI and its practical application in reality. So Jamie Dimon just recently said that AI could be as transformative as electricity or the internet. That could be very hyperbolic, but it could also be true. If we're looking at how people are forecasting AI in the business world and its impact, I really like what PwC did, and they presented this at the National Retail Federation in January, where they talked about innovation being at a tipping point. If you think about innovation and AI innovation in terms of exponential growth, you can see that there are several factors that are causing this growth. There are more breakthroughs in the last 3 years than in the last 70. So you can look at things like the speed of innovation, our ability to use 6 times the power of compute to be able to enable near unhuman predictive capabilities. We can look at the maturity of technology, and now we can look at compute power, which is 60 billion teraflops per US dollar. So the cost of data is coming down, and yet the urgency of adoption is rising. So if you look at some of the facts that we can pull out of this, Gen AI hit 60% household adoption in 2023, and we are slightly lagging in corporate adoption, but I'll show you a little bit more about that. Goldman Sachs has quoted that generative AI will increase global GDP about 7% in the next 10 years. That's about $7 trillion in increase in global GDP. The investment of AI could peak at about 2.5 to 4% GDP. So that's $75 billion to $1.2 trillion. That is so large that it's roughly the GDP of Saudi Arabia. They also talked about how many years it's going to take for AI adoption to actually come and we can actually see it and realize it. The realization of this, they're anticipating, might not come till the second half of this decade. But the second half of this decade started in January. We're also thinking about the impact of AI, and the impact could be about 15% increase in US labor productivity. An increase in labor productivity has implications to the workers, which we're going to talk about today. If you look at the number of companies that have adopted AI, you can start to see that large companies are really, really bringing it on board, with the US topping over 80% adoption of use of AI in looking at machine learning, computer vision, and natural language processing as part of their business functions. You can also see that large organizations are starting to adopt it at a much higher clip than smaller organizations. So you see a trailing indicator here, where you can see the large companies actually starting to adopt it at much greater rates. We're also looking at the other implications of AI. So if you think about what happened at the World Economic Forum, they put out a risk assessment forecast where they ask major companies to say, where do you see the risk in the next 2 years and the next 10 years? In the next 2 years, leaders put forward that they thought that misinformation and disinformation were the number one risks of AI. If you put that out to 10 years, that risk for misinformation and disinformation, people's concerns about this at the corporate level are dropping down to 6th and 7th places, right? And the number one thing that people are worried about is not AI, they're worrying about things like extreme weather events. So we're starting to think about how AI is going to impact us, but we know that there's going to be long-term implications of AI in society. McKinsey talked about how consumer insights and organizations will start to use Gen AI. And we can see that in our sector, in consumer goods and retail, the number one use case is marketing and retail, with the number two use case being product and service and product development and services. What's also interesting is how we're using it as society. So I really like what Harvard Business Review does generally. You can think about what they're doing with their AI use cases. So when we're talking about Gen AI use cases from last year to this year, the number one use case last year that people were talking about was content creation and editing. There was also a lot of work being put into AI with technical research assistance, troubleshooting, and coding specifically. What's interesting is that 2025, the number one use case in society is therapy and companionship. So we're starting to trust AI as our friend and our therapist far more. And that jumped from number 3 to number 1 at 31%. What's also interesting, if you look at this, and this is a little bit more on the humorous side, if you look at the deeper dive of the top 100 Gen AI use cases, if you look down at number 63, one of the use cases is disputing a fine. Some of the other use cases are how can I use AI to break the rules, which is something that's still in the top 100. And also, sadly, if you like to work out, planning workouts is at the bottom at number 100. So, but all that aside, it's very interesting to see how we're starting to use AI in society. But you can also see that the organizations using AI has rapidly increased over the last year. And you can see a powerful change of the use, not just AI, but the use of Gen AI in the office and in businesses from 23 to 24 with a huge spike off to the right. This is data from March 25, so this is just a few weeks ago. Again, grounding ourselves in the reality of how companies and businesses are using AI, you can see that the number one use case that people are starting to use is supply chain and inventory management. Because companies and CEOs are looking to figure out ways AI can reduce costs and reduce OpEx. So we can see that also HR and IT are starting to spike in their use case at 50% and 42% of companies reporting that they're starting to use AI there. And what they're looking at is between 34 and 50% reporting operating expenses savings between 10% and 20% of the top line. Now, when we talk about worker productivity, this is really, really important because we do have to think about what the goals are with AI in business. PwC, again, does a fantastic job looking and forecasting, and you can see from this chart, which is an eye chart, but really important that they can see a real impact of AI from end to end. From the beginning of product creation through strategy, through process, through finance, inventory control, merchandising, and sales. There's a place for AI in every single thing as we think about every aspect of our business, as we think about this as an end-to-end solution all the way through. You'll hear me talk a little bit in this presentation today about Amy Webb and her Future Today strategy group. Amy Webb is a 20-year speaker and veteran at South by Southwest. That is a venue that I find really, really important. I call it Davos, or World Economic Forum for the rest of us, as we get to go to Austin and we get to learn about what people are talking about what is the direction of travel in society, in technology, in the creator community, in policy. And what she put forward in this March at South by Southwest is that these are, if you can look at this chart, this is every single technology that you can think of, from living intelligence to AI to quantum to space technology. And what's really interesting is she's forecasting when it will hit each industry at what time over the next 10 years, and whether it has high relevance or low relevance. What's interesting about this chart is there are very, very few gray boxes in here that say that AI is of low relevance. What I put into this chart here is everything that you see in white as today. These are things which will affect the retail industry and the CPG industry today, or when we say soon, we say in the next 1 to 3 years, which is really, really interesting because if you know from our corporate calendars, we're all planning product to be launched in spring 26 and fall 26. So we're already planning it 18 months advance today. So you can see that every aspect of AI, advanced sensors, computing manufacturing, AR, VR, XR, climate green tech, and even robotics will be working their way into our industry now, and we need to be prepared for it. What's also interesting when we talk about jobs is we think about where the spikes are in terms of where AI is being put in job descriptions. This is a really interesting graph by country of how often AI, or natural language processing neural networks, or other terminology, is put into requests for jobs and job queries. You see a spike in 2020 when GPT-3 came out, and all of a sudden AI and job descriptions started spiking up. Then it flatlined, and then in 2022, when ChatGPT came out, you can also see that we have more spikes in the need and the request for AI to be put into job descriptions. So it is a skill that's going to be very, very important that we all understand how to learn and leverage. Last year, Harvard Business Review did a very interesting study around what 570 experts predicted would be the impact of AI on jobs. And what's interesting is they predicted the impact of AI on everything. Very harrowing and a great report, but what they talked about is a kind of a timeline over the next 10 years. By 2026, they say that job tasks are going to be partially automated, so we're starting to see that. By 2029, they said that new technologies will create new types of occupations and totally new industries. We can envision that. By 2030, more and more occupations are augmented by AI, helping people work more efficiently, and by 2037, which I would argue will happen a lot sooner than that, people will work alongside robot colleagues. More and more jobs are entirely replaced by technology. What you see on the left here is figure 1. Figure 1 is the robot that's being assembled with ChatGPT and Jeff Bezos to be able to have humanoid robots be automated and work alongside of you. So this is today. This is not 11 years from now, this is today. So we can see that what they're talking about is right. And the impact of jobs, we can also, this just came out in April. Toby Lutke, and this was very famous, infamous even, that he talked about the fact that he would accept no more job recs unless managers could prove that they couldn't fill that job with AI first. That sent a chill down the spine of people looking for jobs, but on the other hand, other CEOs said, yes, I think that's a great idea. So what we're really starting to worry about now is whether AI has the ability to affect entry-level jobs. Anish Raman, the Chief Economic Opportunity Officer at LinkedIn, actually sounded the alarm with the New York Times last week and said, we are starting to see a disruption like we haven't seen since the 80s. So this is a real watch out for young kids moving out of college and going into the workforce, which is, to us, a clarion call for the need to upskill. Upskilling is going to be very, very important as we understand that AI is a tool, and it's an important tool to do our jobs. A lot of people like to talk about the fact that AI isn't going to take your job. The person that knows how to use AI is going to take your job, and I think that's never been more true. But we are going to have a watch out for the next generation. McKinsey also reported recently that, and this is the good news part of this, that corporations are starting to understand that they need to use this as a tool and that they're investing in upskilling. So you can see that in the last few years, about 11% of employees are starting to be reskilled. And in the next 3 years, corporations are planning reskilling up to the tune of about 28%. So we know the corporations are taking this seriously, and they're planning to upskill people in AI now, which is great news. So a year ago, I was presenting on AI and talking about the practical applications of AI. And on July 29th, I was on a particular stage discussing how we would get to this idea of AI ubiquity. When is going to be the point where AI is ubiquitous and it's the ingredient layer in everything? And what I talked about is that the road to ubiquity will be both incremental and exponential. So we understand exponential growth. It's a curve that continues to grow with the components of being a 10x factor and a 10x factor and a 10x factor, and all of a sudden it's upon us. But it's the incremental part that I think is really interesting. So I liken it to the process of boiling a frog. If you know the recipe of boiling a frog, it's actually very simple. You put a frog in a pot of cold water, you turn the heat up slowly, and then it doesn't notice it. It feels like it's warm, it feels like it's a sauna, it feels like it's a hot tub, and all of a sudden you have frog soup. So this is what we had talked about last year. The road to ubiquity was really, I think, always going to be around search. So when we started to think about what search has meant over the last 15 years, it's really been about Google and to a much smaller extent, Bing and other Microsoft search engines. Now, we started to see that AI is moving into search in a big way. We have seen the launch of Gemini, Claude and Perplexity, what's happening with Microsoft Edge. If you haven't tried Coggy, it's actually really interesting. Perplexity, AI Overview. So we're starting to see a lot of AI search. The next step to ubiquity was really getting AI from search and into the workplace. So we had predicted that what you would start to see was that when it is the ingredient layer for things like the Google Office Suite, it's in Microsoft Copilot, it's in Excel, that everything will be AI powered in your daily work life. And all of a sudden, in the last 6 months, Gemini launched major releases. Microsoft Copilot is now available in every single office that carries the Microsoft Suite. And even if you're a coder, GitHub has their Copilot function. So if you think about it, if it's in search everywhere, if it's in your office everywhere, then it is the ingredient layer, and all of a sudden, dinner's served. So these are some AI images that I actually generated recently, and I have a very simple prompt. A human frog-like hybrid creature works as a chef in a restaurant and has hands that are frog-like and wears an apron. And we can do this in an instant. Last week actually was a very, very interesting week for AI. And this was probably not as well covered as it should have been. And this was the Google I/O conference, the in-out conference of intelligence. And Sundar Pichai was on stage, and he was quoted as saying that he's launching more intelligence available to everyone, everywhere, by putting AI into everything. It's going to be a technology that will be so ubiquitous that we won't even notice it and we won't even name it. So this is Sundar Pichai's quote on March 21st. If we paid attention, and a lot of people did, what they launched on the 21st was amazing. What they did was everything that they said they wanted to do. They put it in Gemini Pro. They put it in search mode. They made AI shopping available, which is something that Google has been working on for years. They launched Veo 3, which I'll talk about in a minute. They put in something called Flow for the creator community. In Beam, they have real live speech translation in meetings, and also the ability to go from 2D to 3D. They launched Gemini Live, which is an app with a camera that allows natural interactions with an AI assistant. They did Project Mariner to be able to enable agency inside the Google Suite, and they launched Google XR glasses. Now, if you remember Google Glass, that was something a decade ago that now is commercial. There's inline lens, speakers, display. It'll map your route. You can talk to it, you can interact with it, and you can interact with the real world with Android glasses. And what's interesting is that they monetize this. So if you get this whole thing, it's $250 a month. So the road to ubiquity is definitely here. So we're starting to also see people that are SaaS service providers in the space. So Business of Fashion laid out and noted 3 different SaaS providers that they were starting to look at. Daydream Capsule, and Constructor. And they're starting to look at some of the stats of being able to have people on board, having percentage of images being uploaded into Capsule in just a few weeks, and the increases in the capability of search using these tools. So Daydream is something called the ChatGPT for shopping. So this is the ability to say, I need something and I don't know where to get it, and it goes in and does shopping for you and finds out what you can find in certain people's catalog. They just got $50 million in seed funding. Capsule is similar, it's more like the Shazam of shopping, where you have your phone, you can take a picture of something, you can say, what is it, where can I get it, and how much can it cost? It has over 20,000 scraped data points every single day. So you see that the SaaS service world is growing. Constructor is also very interesting. So they're looking at the ability to have a B2B platform that enables brands and retailers to embed AI into product search. Their evaluation is $550 million. It's tripled since 2022. And so they're working with partners like Under Armour and Birkenstock, and really, really similar to other really, really good incumbents now, like Lily AI, Bloombreach, and Vantage Discovery. So you're starting to see a lot more shopping-empowered search. So these are the practical application layers of how AI is actually being used in our industry. So we're talking a lot right now about text to image. But one of the things that McKinsey called out is beyond the ability for us to say there's a tremendous amount of text to image out there, the next, after coding, the next most important use case is text to video. So I had the good fortune of working with Machine Cinema at Fordham University this spring, and we worked with video editors, and the brief was this: make a 5-minute video in 4 hours. And what I thought was really impressive, and this was in February, that they employed 15 different tools. Some of the tools I knew, but I'm not in the editing community, and some of them I didn't know. Udio, OmniHumans, 11 Labs, but it's everything around music, voice, editing, and adding in video. So they actually did some really, really great stuff. I'm going to play the video right now. This is the video that they came up with. This took them 4 hours to make. So you can see the reference to Kling AI and some of the other tools. This is impressive video. So that was 4 months ago. After the launch of Veo 3, which I just described a couple minutes ago at the Google conference, there has been an explosion of people using Veo 3 for video images that are, and to be fair, that 5 hours of video that I just showed you, that the 3 minutes of video that took 5 hours, there were some inconsistencies here. This is what Veo 3 launched a week ago, and this is what you can get now.
Welcome to a non-existent car show. Let's see some opinions.
I mean, man, the acceleration is crazy. You look far, step on the pedal, and you are there.
I feel safe with him in an SUV, and it seems to be like the right type of car for him.
I think the range is only going to get better. Sorry.
We don't want to drive gas cars anymore.
Yeah, no more gas cars.
You can see I'm kind of a misfit here, but don't tell anyone. I've just bought an electric car.
I think it's really great for families and for little babies with all the safety features that these SUVs have.
But what you're really seeing is that technology is going to be very, very important in terms of how we go forward.
It was great to come to the conference because my husband loves cars.
I think I have to buy an EV now. I love my muscle cars, but
I try to stay as healthy as I can so I can make it to the next car show.
So that is the difference that we're seeing between February and now. This is also something that Google can do in Flow. I won't play the whole video, but I think it's interesting to see the special effects that creators can start to use. And again, this all was launched about 3 weeks ago. So the ability for us to cross the uncanny valley, for us to believe the images that we see and to use them in media and in the creator community is exploding like it's never exploded before. So I'm going to go back to grounding us in reality, some of the facts that some of the consulting companies were talking about. PwC is thinking now about how do we adopt AI? How are we adopting it into the enterprise? And you can see we've got force rank from left to right. The bubbles illustrate how big the adoption rate is at different points along the journey of AI adoption, from productivity to vendor-embedded AI, which is what I just showed you, some of these SaaS service providers, to finding targeted use case focus, and then scaling AI across the enterprise. So you can see that a lot of companies are looking at figuring out ways to get speed to market, how to scale to many users, but that overall use of generative AI is hard to measure. What we're finding is the next phase of adoption in terms of practical application is to find specific use cases, to use these SaaS providers like the people that I talked about earlier, and how can they implement AI into your enterprise to actually show value. Once that value is shown, then that becomes the gateway drug to enterprise and platform AI. So I'm gonna go back to the conversation with Amy Webb, where her Future Today strategy group actually had some incredibly easy and straightforward and practical ideas about how to execute AI into your enterprise. And she talked about 5 different things. Democratize your foundational knowledge, build a culture of experimentation, identify high impact, low risk use cases, which is actually what PwC just said. Equip teams with tools and guardrails is very important. And then build something like Tiger Teams. These Tiger Teams can take these learnings and scale them out. So I'm going to go through them one by one real quick. So we talked earlier about this road to ubiquity. When we're starting to bring in these tool sets which are available to everyone, are readily available, and sometimes free because they're already in your search engine. Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, these are very inexpensive. You can also think about what DeepSeek is doing in China and what's happening with OpenAI. But the idea is that you would start to bring into your enterprise the idea of demonstrable knowledge, AI literacy. How do we get everyone in the organization to understand and to use the tools effectively? So this is a really, really important ingredient layer to be able to bring AI into your organization, is bring the literacy in and teach everybody that it exists and how you can use it. Also, the idea is that you want to make sure to bring in a culture of experimentation. Now, I really, really do not like the idea of fail fast, because I don't think that anyone likes to fail, and organizations don't like to fail. So I don't like the idea of move fast and break things. I do like the idea to move fast and learn things. So Amy Webb puts forward, and I do agree with her, that you can create safe places where any risk is very low, and so the reward can be very high. So this is very, very important to figure out sandboxes and places where AI can be used to prove its effectiveness. So this is a very important aspect of bringing AI into your enterprise. Also, the next step is, again, going back to what PwC said, find use cases that are high impact, low risk. If it's on your supply chain, if it's on the creator side, we're seeing a lot of execution on the creator side, and also I mentioned with code. Find a use case inside your organization that would be really, really effective, and you know that it will actually have high impact. And then build a pilot around that to demonstrate the value, and then socialize these results out into the organization. This is a really, really good example, and we'll play this video real quick, of Gamma. Gamma is an AI design tool that basically replaces PowerPoint. It's a very, very interesting tool. It uses ChatGPT, it uses DALL-E, it uses Gemini, it uses all the tools, and then you subscribe to the SaaS platform, and it can look at things like PowerPoint presentations, websites, and social media. Great example of a SaaS provider that's low risk, that will actually be able to impact the enterprise pretty quickly. Another really great provider that I really like is Lido. Lido takes a tremendous amount of files, PDFs, Excel documents, and then moves them into basically a CSV file. So PDF files that are locked, things that are coming off of websites, they're really, really difficult to get to. And this basically, and I've seen this work from a drop and drag perspective, very, very effective, inexpensive, easy to use, and a high impact into the enterprise, because you're starting to see how tools like this can increase efficiency. Another thing that Amy Webb talks about at Future Today Strategy Group is the legal aspect. Very important to understand where the guardrails are in terms of intellectual property and risk. So please don't forget to bring in your legal teams and make sure that you have guardrails around what the tool set that your associates are using as we implement AI into the enterprise. And lastly, and I really like this idea of building these ideas about tiger teams, taking it out of the sandbox and saying, you knew about this, you did a good job, how can you socialize this back into your enterprise? So tools like Loom, if you haven't used Loom, is great. They're video clips that are AI scripted, so you can actually fast forward through them. Loom Reels are great. Using Notebook LM, using a large language model to be able to use it as a drop-in file to share those learnings. These are great AI tools to help amplify the use of AI into the enterprise. So we think about these use cases, right? There's a couple great use cases in our industry. One that is around demand planning. Demand planning for our industry has also always been a dark art. If you think about the fact that we have two different vectors that we think about how to forecast orders in the future. We think about what we did in the past in terms of seasonal sales, and then we try to figure out what's historical data. So it's basically on an A/B axis. The problem that we have in the industry is that we have a lot of excess inventory. If we have 70% sell-through, we think we're doing great. But 20 or 30% of excess inventory has to go somewhere. That leads to the waste in our industry that we all decry. I think what's super interesting is companies like Impact Analytics. Dick's Sporting Goods invested $30 million in them last year, and they're doing a tremendous amount of stuff on not just the historical data and looking backwards in time, but how can we use ambient data on the go forward to try to figure out how we get a better inventory management by location, by zip code, by holiday, by things which we are looking at ambient data which might affect our sales. So I put in here the Barbie effect. If we can anticipate that there's a movie launch that's going to affect how much pink we need to use, then I think that's really important. If we can start to think about the Ozempic effect, then we can future cast that out to be better and smarter and leaner. So using AI for probability planning, for demand planning, is going to make us more efficient. Ikigai also does a really great job here. So there are a couple of different sort of new incumbents that are able to use this data. And this is a very interesting platform because this is pretty much drop and drag. So this is basically the Wix of building a graphic model for forecast accuracy. Tremendous amount of interesting ambient data that we can put in here to get better and smarter at what we do. 6 Atomic is doing a fantastic job right now in using text to image and text to pattern generation. So we're moving from text to image to text to pattern. These are anatomically correct patterns that actually connect back to Clo so that this file can be sent to a factory and it never has to actually be made. So we're working into a sampleless and sample-less environment. When we start to use digital text to image and then text to pattern generation, we can start to lower our supply chains, time to market. Manus is actually an agent model that's actually getting a lot of attention right now. So there's someone to look at when we talk about how do we implement agents. And agents, which is another discussion, is how we can empower multiple tasks being happening at a single time in the background, and then we just get fed the result. There is some risk that we can also discuss, but it's really important to think about how we can start to use agency effectively in our industries. Lastly, this just came out last week. We're starting to see AI being put into the shopping module. So I talked about AI going into search, AI going into the office, and then AI going into shopping. So Shopify just launched their new store builder app. So this allows you, again, to drop and drag and create online stores in minutes. Years ago, before COVID, when there were virtual showrooms, you used to have to build these in gaming platforms. Now it's all drop and drag functionality. So we're starting to get AI guided search and AI guided shopping, and the new releases are being launched almost daily. We talked in the beginning about this and how to bring AI into your enterprise, and what we wanted to discuss is what are the facts around how it's affecting our industry, how it's affecting retail, how it's affecting consumer packaged goods, and how quickly it's moving. What are the factors that are causing this change, and how soon is it going to reach our industry? So those took the time today to define this. There's a big conversation about whether this is overhyped or underhyped. So I'm going to leave you with this. This is Eric Schmidt. He was the CEO of Google from 2011 to 2015. And here's how we talked about at a TED Talk just a few weeks ago.
It's when you're growing at the rate that we're growing, you get so much done in a year, you forget how far you went. Humans can't understand that. And we're in this situation where the exponential is moving like this. As this stuff happens quicker, you will forget what was true 2 years ago or 3 years ago. That's the key thing. So my advice to you all is ride the wave, but ride it every day. Don't view it as episodic and something you can, but understand it and build on it. Each and every one of you has a reason to use this technology. If you're an artist, a teacher, a physician, a business person, a technical person, if you're not using this technology, you're not going to be relevant compared to your peer groups and your competitors and the people who want to be successful. Adopt it and adopt it fast.
Adopt it and adopt fast. So the AI is not overhyped, and we need to use it as a tool, and we need to be ready for it now. So thanks for your time. Here's how to get in touch with me.